Have you ever been pinning your seam, pinned all the way along, gotten to the end, and then found this? What am I supposed to do with that? Or finished up sewing your waist seam only to finish, open it up, and find that your skirt and bodice seams don't even nearly join up? Stick around, because in this video I want to talk with you about some ways that I wish I was shown and that I knew when I first started sewing about how to actually pin and ease seams together, get them even, and how to just generally pin it all together so that when you sew it, it's perfect. Welcome back, my lovely ladies and gents. It is so nice to see you here again. If we haven't met yet, my name is Evelyn Wood, and here we talk everything about sewing, vintage and fashion. So if you like that, perhaps consider subscribing. But today I want to talk to you further about pinning. Now, we touched some of this on last video. There'll be a link down below on actually like the methods, on the ways and the directions to pin. This is going to be about how to actually negotiate pinning those seams together, easing in the amounts, how to actually manage it. One of the mantras that I have and that I teach my sewing students is that how it's pinned is how it will be sewn. So if you've finished pinning your seam and it's puckery, it's uneven, there's tucks, things don't match up, don't bother sewing it, because it won't magically get better after you've run it through the machine. It never happened to me, at least. That's been my experience. So don't sew it. You want it pinned perfectly before you sew it. One of the other things that I also say is that sewing is 70% preparation and 30% actually sewing. So if you spend the time preparing everything, pinning it perfectly, the sewing part is really, really easy. So there are 5 things that I want to talk with you, 5 steps to go through when I'm pinning all my seams to get them perfect. But let's start with number 1. So let me demonstrate by using this toile that I've pulled apart just for you guys to show you. We'll use this waist seam. So on the waist seam, we of course have this curved circular skirt. So there's a curved seam going onto the straight bodice, and we've got side seams to match and everything. So it's a bit of everything to show you. First thing we need to do is to pin these start and stop points, so the ends of the fabric together. Once those are pinned, then you want to match up any seams, notches, anything else along that seam that needs to match up and stay together. Any points that you need matching. So for this, I have some side seams that I want to match perfectly. Now I'm going to come back and at the end show you my little trick on how to pin these to match these perfectly. But for now, we're not looking for perfect. We're just getting it all sort of pinned first, and then we'll come back later and look at perfecting everything. Okay? Now the start and stop points are matched, and all the seams and notches along the seam are actually now all pinned together. Now the second step is to actually break it down into smaller and smaller sections from these matching points. Here's the trick. You want to hold, say, this pin, and this is where you need all of your fingers, okay? Hold this one, pull them tight, and then this is circular, so pull this up, and you want to grab that middle section to make smaller and smaller sections, and then come to here and you can halve this one again. Get this nice and pin. So we've gone from this section, we've made it smaller and smaller sections until you get the amount of pins in there that you like. So step number 3 is to really use your whole body to actually achieve this sometimes. So let me show you on a really long seam to make this even more obvious. This skirt side seam, right, is enormous. How do you actually navigate and negotiate this? Here's the tip. Same process. Put your start and stop points together, so the ends of the fabric, each end together. Then what I do is I use my whole body. So I'll put this just down on the table, lean into it. Same process, break it down to smaller and smaller sections. Grab the center or thereabouts, give it a pin. Now I've got a smaller section to work with, so it's a lot easier. For this smaller section, I could do the same thing, use my body weight here, so I've still got 2 hands free, or I could use my elbow for this one perhaps. So what I might do, Actually, I might do it this way. This feels really awkward at first, I know. I see my students struggle with it, but it's something I do and I don't even realize anymore, and it's the only way that I could actually pin all this and have tension on the seams and get it all even. So I would pop my elbow on this end here, right on top of the pin. Be careful not to stab yourself. Grab the other one. Now you want to hold right on top of that pin where it's being held, not before, not after. You don't want to stretch it. And again, when we're pulling this tight, we're not stretching this out of shape. We just want to pull it taut ever so slightly so those two layers are sort of synced up and that ease is evenly distributed. I can then grab a smaller section, pin it in, and now I've got an even smaller section to work with. Maybe I'll do it this way. Maybe I could use this arm. Or actually, when it gets smaller and smaller, you can actually just use your palm here. So I would put pressure right here, hold this taut, get these two where I want them, and then smaller and smaller sections. Using your whole body if you need to. You're kind of using your body as another hand. You really do need more than two hands sometimes in sewing, and this is how I achieve it. So let's finish up this waist seam. I'm going to use my arm here, my elbow, to put pressure on this side because I want two hands to pin. That way that circular skirt is going to be evenly distributed throughout that smaller section that we're going in every time. I can easily then put my pin in. So what I mean by evenly distributing the fullness and the curve is often when you're pinning, you'll pin up one side and then you'll find that you have this like chunk left over here, right? Yeah. So by holding in, so you can't see the pins that way, by holding in right on this pin where you want them to fit and pulling them taut, don't stretch anything, you can then, that curve there ends up being evenly distributed, and then you can, using all of your body, lift it up, get it to the spot that you want, and then you can pin it in and you've got that evenly distributed. And that's another plane, I'm so sorry. Now it's the step that we come back and make everything perfect. So it's hard at first to negotiate those long lengths and all those curves. You just want to break it down into those smaller sections, and it's much more manageable to now come back and make sure everything's perfect. So that means checking both sides and making sure that there's no puckers or tucks that have been accidentally pinned in. One of the tricks I usually do is I'll often undo and redo in almost all pins if it's a really tricky spot. Using the idea of using my whole body for this, or at least my whole hands, is I will hold with sort of these two fingers down here, kind of like this, right on the pin, so it's got that nice tight spot. Same thing down here. And then I've still got these fingers free to, if you pull it out, and you can kind of just jiggle it around a little bit, and it just will then get it that little bit more perfect than how it was before and even it out and make it better. Now it helps, I have really big hands. I can't find gloves that fit, but it really helps when trying to pin seams, I'll tell you that. Anyway, it is at this point, make sure it is perfectly pinned, that there are no mistakes, no puckers, no tucks. As I said, how it's pinned will how it will be sewn. So make sure it looks now like you want it to look when it's sewn. And now this brings me to my last tip on how to actually pin those side seams so that when you sew them together, they will match up perfectly every time. Now I hinted about this in my last video, but wanted to touch it again in case you hadn't watched that, and make sure you really get to know how it's done. Okay, here is the not so secret way to get your side seams here to match up perfectly every time. Now you probably roughly have it pinned. First, open them out, make sure you get them right matching. Now you want them to be matching right on your stitch line. So if you've only got a 1 centimeter seam allowance, you want them to be matched up right on that 1 centimeter line. If you've got a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, you want them to match up right on that line. Put your pin in right on that stitch line so that you can open it up and check, and then adjust as much as you need to. Okay, they're lining up great. But as you know, when you're sewing, this seam can be pushed and you need to take this pin out as you sew along. So the trick is to then use one of these crosshairs pins, as we talked about last week, put it right in the seam, right in the seam. You want one end to go in this side and one end on below. So you've got a little crosshair. This is the crosshair pins. So that when you're sewing, you can sew down here. You can take this one out and then very, very slowly, and even just use your hand wheel for this one to go over that pin, 1 or 2, and then take it out. It's going to be sewn perfectly every time. Most of my students are actually quite surprised by how much I use my own body and all parts of my fingers and hands to actually pin and manipulate the fabric and get it how I want it to sit. And as I said, these aren't really things that I was shown so much. It's things that I've learnt and have just picked up along the way to get it to do what I want it to do. But I really wish I had been shown because it would have made it a lot quicker. So tell me below which one of these intrigues you the most to try. And as we are all unique and have our own ways, I would love to hear if you have your own tricks that you have found through your sewing time that help you in just being able to pin the fabric and get it to sit the way you want it to sit. Leave your comment below and remember to read through those comments because you might pick up the little gem that's perfect for you down there as well. I really look forward to reading all your comments below. I apologize that it has come to the point that unfortunately I cannot actually reply to them all, but please know I do read them all and appreciate it, and I love that you guys all read them all and pick up some tips down there as well. So please like this video if you liked it, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Check it down below, make sure you are subscribed, hit that bell notification so YouTube will actually notify you next video I make, and until next time, bye. Another plane. Then look, I can, with this hand, oh, how many planes?